Hello, this is Eric Larson speaking. I'm here with another engineering video. This is about Autodesk Fusion. Fusion 360 is what they used to call it. It's now Fusion. I'm going to talk about 2D versus 3D mode. In Fusion, there are basically two different modes of the application, 2D and 3D. We're also going to talk about creating a three-dimensional body. We're going to talk about creating a sketch, creating a body by extruding, talking about sketching on a body, creating a body by revolving, and then we'll talk about some different types of sketch planes. And the three different types are cardinal plane, a plane on a body, and a tangent plane. What I hope the viewer will do is to watch at least once without focusing too much on the individual button clicks. Try to get the main concepts and then go back and watch again and replicate on your own screen each of the steps. Just hit the pause button on the video and go through it while Fusion is open on your computer and reproduce each step that you see on my happening on the video. Okay, so I'm gonna minimize this, bring up Fusion. Okay, when this is an example of what you see when Fusion starts. It is inherently in a three-dimensional mode. The menu items are such that you can create boxes, cylinders. It is inherently three-dimensional when it starts, and probably the first thing that you're going to do when you start Fusion is click on some existing design, and you'll see it in 3D, and you can edit the design, you can edit the sketches, you can look at the different components, look at the bodies in the components, and things like that. So now, I would say one of the first things I'm going to do when I start Fusion is probably turn off the data panel, just so I have some more room. And in this case, I'm not really interested in this particular design, so I'm going to close it by clicking on the X. Now we're still in 3D mode. If I create a new design by clicking on the plus button here, we're still in 3D, and the first thing that I typically do with Fusion is I like to turn on things, so that I go on the browser. This is your browser. Browser is the set of things on the left side of your screen. I typically hit the caret. That's the caret is this little triangle, and then I click on this eyeball to make sure that things are turned on. And I like to see the origin, which is here in the center, and I like to see each of these cardinal planes, which are and you can help remember what these planes are by looking at the view cube, which is over here on the right. And what you can see here is that the x-axis is in red, comes along here. The y-axis is in green, and the z-axis is here in blue. Okay, and I will very typically, or one thing that I'm very frequently doing is hitting on this little home button up here on the view cube, and that will always take me back to a familiar perspective. Okay, so there are several ways to create a 3D object. The most straightforward is to hit the create button, pick what you want, and in this case we'll pick something simple such as a box. The first click is okay, I guess the first click wants to select a plane, so we'll select this plane, place the first corner, place the second corner. In this case we will go we'll try and take it out to we'll try and take it 60 by 60. Okay, and then we see this little blue box. It's saying 10. I'm going to change that to 60. And very quickly you can see that we've created a 60 by 60 by 60 new body. I say OK. If we hit the caret and then expand the list of bodies, you can see that we've created We've created a box. I'm going, oops, I didn't want that. I didn't want to offset. If I try to rename this, I'll click it a couple times, and I'll say that it's a box 60 by 60 by 60. Okay, so that's a simple way to create the object, and it's easy. And if I right-click it, I can say move, and I'll just move this a little bit out of the way so that it's not hogging the origin. Okay, and there it is. It's there. Okay, so this technique works very fine for simple shapes, but if you need a more complicated object, you want to create a sketch and then extrude or evolve the sketch profile. It's also possible to sweep and loft, but we're not going to talk about those within this video. When you create a sketch, you go from 3D mode to 2D. You'll see the menu items change to things that are relevant to 2D sketching, and we'll do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn off visibility on this box so it doesn't distract us, and we will pull down the Create menu and say Create Sketch. Okay, so the first thing that is wanted in the Create Sketch process is to say which plane do you want to create the sketch on. And so it's pretty normal to think of the X and Y planes as something that you want to sketch on, and your Z-axis is now coming towards you. And you can see, we can turn off the sketch palette because it's kind of extra stuff. You can see by looking at the view cube that the Y and X axes are there, so we're now sketching on the X and Y axes. A sketch is always created on a planar surface. You cannot sketch on a curved surface. It's typical when you start to always select one of the cardinal planes. And so in this case, I've selected the XY plane, and anything in the third dimension starts coming into the Z-axis. So it's normal to start your sketch on the XY plane. If you don't have any reason to do something different, choose the XY plane. The choice of which plane to sketch on is not typically very important. You can choose whatever you want and later rotate it. I like to ensure that when I hit the home icon on the view cube, it's showing me a view of my design that makes sense and is convenient. Don't worry too much initially about which plane you sketch on. All of them will work. So we selected the XY plane and hit Create Sketch. And so about the simplest thing that we might sketch here is if you say Create, select Rectangle, and say 2-point rectangle. So the first click is the left corner, the next corner is the right corner. We're done, so we hit Enter. I click on the Enter key. Now we would probably dimension it. I'm going to press the D key, which says give me a dimension. I click the top. It says 50. I'll take that. I hit Enter. I click the right. It says 50. I'll take that. We're cool. And we see that the blocks has turned from blue to black. We've got a fully dimensioned sketch. I hit Escape to get out of dimension mode. And we have a complete sketch. So now we go to the upper right and hit one of the most important controls. This is the Finish Sketch button. And we say that we're done with sketching. And now we have exited 2D mode. We're back into 3D mode. And if we turn off visibility so that there's nothing confusing, we just turn off visibility on these cardinal planes, you can see that our sketch is here. If I click on it, I've selected the profile. If you look on the lower right here, you will see that a profile has been selected. And the next thing that we might like to do is create a 3D object by extruding. So I'll pull down Create, Extrude, or I can hit the E key. You can see E is a shortcut. But if I say Extrude, it's now asking me how far do I want to extrude it. And if I type in 50 on this dialog box, wahoo, we've got a 50 by 50 cube. Very simple. It's all done. It's now called Body 2. I'm going to label this or rename it, and I'm going to call it Cube 50 by 50 by 50. Okay, so it's named. And now we have two different bodies, but only one of them is visible. If I go to the eyeball icon and click it, you can see that our 60 by 60 cube is still there, but it's not visible. Okay. So we now have an entity that we can print with our 3D printer. So I've selected the cube. If I pull down the File menu and say 3D Print, the selection is selected. Our OK button should work. If I click OK, there it goes. And you should be able to see that Cura will be launched correctly. You can see the little symbol. And we'll wait a second for Cura to come up. And this is a little bit slow. Okay, here's Cura. And if we keep waiting, we will see that when Cura is working, we should see our 50 by 50 cube appear and be ready to print. And this is a little bit time consuming, but it generally works. So we'll just wait a couple more seconds. Good time to relax. Pause your brain here for Cura. Okay, here's Cura, and here's our cube. If we look down here, we will see that it says, yeah, cube 50 by 50 by 50. So that's perfectly cool. If we say edit, select all models, and then arrange all models, we see that it's now properly arranged. We don't even have to really do anything. We can lift it up, drop it down. It's ready to go. And we can slice it and do all the things we normally do with Cura. But I'm going to kind of minimize that part of the discussion. Okay? So the next important concept is that of creating sketches on a planar surface that is part of a body, which we created earlier. So you might do this if you need to create a feature such as a hole or a bump on a surface. So we're gonna select this surface and then pull down create sketch. Okay, now we're sketching on that surface. Simplest thing I can think of is to create a circle or create a hole. I'm going to say I want a hole, or I want a circle that's 10. I finish that sketch. Let's say that I select this surface, and now I'm going to use the shortcut. I'm going to hit this create sketch. Now we're here. I'm going to create a 2-point rectangle on the surface of that body. I finished that sketch, and now you can see that we have two different sketches on two different faces. And if we click on the caret, we will see that we have a total of 3 sketches, and we can turn off visibility for different sketches, and we can also rename our sketches. I'm going to call this side sketch, and I'm going to turn this one on, and I'm going to name it top sketch. And the first sketch that we created is probably well described as being the base sketch. Okay, so now the thing that we might want to do is do some extrusion. So if we zoom in and we click on this profile, and you can see we've got a profile selected, we can do create, extrude, and let's say that we type 10. We can bring this thing out 10 millimeters. That's cool. We can click on this one and say E for extrude and bring this one up 20. That's cool. The other thing which we can do is maybe instead of wanting to add to that, we might want to cut instead. So if we go down to the timeline and right click on the extrude that we just created and say edit to feature, we can say, instead of join, we can say cut. And we need to kind of change the direction of this. And so now we've got a 10 millimeter cut. We say OK, and you can see that we basically we cut into our surface. Okay, so one of the most important questions. Let's go back to this one and edit the feature. One of the most important questions about an extrude is what is the operation that you're doing? And in this case, you can see that we said join, which says add to whatever you've got. But you might have said new body instead. If I say OK, now we actually have three bodies. Pardon me. We have three bodies in our overall design. This is the one that we just created. And in general, when we're creating relatively simple things for 3D printing, we only want to have one body that we want to print. And so it would probably be a mistake in this case to have selected new body. But we can always just go back to edit feature, go back and change this, and say go back and call it a join. We say OK, and now you can see that we're back to having only two bodies, not three. We've got our 50 by 50 thing that we've been extruding and cutting into, and we've got our box that's hanging out here from when we first created it. So the other all right, let's see what we want to do. So all right, so we can clean these things up and just kind of get rid of them and say that we don't want to look at those things for the moment. And so there's another way to create a 3D object, and that instead of extruding, and that is by doing a revolve. And when we do a revolve, the starting point is always a 2D sketch. And so in this case, we will create a sketch on the same plane as we did before, which is X and Y. And we'll imagine that and we'll simply draw something that's relatively simple here. We'll create some lines, create a line up, create a line over, create something down, create down, and cool. And so now if we hit enter, we've created a closed profile. And let's say that for the purposes of our example, we want to have something which we revolve about a 10 millimeter radius. So I'm going to dimension the point from here to here, and I'm going to say I want that to be 10. And if we revolve that around the y-axis, which is this axis here, we'll see that there will be a 20 millimeter diameter in the center of our created object. And we might want to have that void in the center of our object to be used for some other part, such as a spiral portion of a marble lifter, for example. Okay, well, what you can see is that we've got a complete sketch. I'm not gonna go through the process of dimensioning everything just because that's time consuming and it's not really important. But if you're building something for real, you probably would put enough dimensions on it so that the sketch turns black. But we don't really have to do that. If I say finish sketch, you can see now that our sketch is now appearing in three-dimensional space. And what we might like to do is revolve it about an axis such as the y-axis, which is the green axis that is sticking up. So if I click here, I've got the profile selected. I pull down create, revolve. The next thing it wants to know about is what is says it's got the profile selected. What is the axis to revolve around? And if I just click this axis here, Wow, that was quick. Okay, it did the revolve, and you can see that the void in the center that we wanted is in fact there. Now, it might be possible, in the case of this particular revolve, if we go back to the timeline and say edit to feature, it's also possible in this case that that maybe we didn't, that we could also say which axis do we want. We'll select it, and we might say that we'll revolve about the x-axis. Well, this gives us something different. It's just kind of interesting to visualize that and think about what we've got, but it's probably not, it's not what we wanted in this case. It's simply different, and it's just interesting to look at and think about. So if I go back to edit feature and click this little X here to say that, okay, now we're back to what we wanted. We've got our revolve, and now we're in 3D mode. So it's also possible to do a revolve around an axis that is not one of the cardinal axes. So if I go back to to my sketch, and I'm going to rename the sketch to say be the revolve sketch. If I go back, if I double click on this sketch, here it'll allow me to edit it, and here I am within the sketch. If I create a line here, say from here to here, hit enter, finish the sketch, we can go back to our revolve and edit the feature, and instead of selecting the cardinal axes, we can click on our line and say to do a revolve around that line that we just created. And if you look at this from the top, you can see that a new object has been created. It was created revolving around our newly created axes, and it's no longer symmetrical about the origin. And this gives us a larger object. It might be what you need, but we'll just cancel that and go back to where we were. Okay, so there's some cases where what we really want to do is to be able to sketch on a curved surface, but we can't. So we must do something else. So let's take an example of a piston. So I'm going to get rid of this, make it invisible, and we will create a cylindrical piston object and see how that works for us. Okay, so what I'm going to do is in this case, I'm going to sketch on the XZ plane. So I'm going to select this plane, XZ plane, say create sketch. Cool. I'm going to create a circle. I'm going to say that it is dimension 50, and say finish the sketch. Okay. I select the profile. I extrude. Here I am at 50, and we've got a cylindrical object which kind of resembles a piston. Okay. Okay, so you can see that we have our piston, you can see we have our piston. But what we're going to do right now is take a pause and jump to the next recording so it doesn't get to be too long. Okay, we're going to take a little pause. We'll restart in part 2.